Special meeting of the Aurora City Council is now called to order. Will the clerk please read the roll?
Mayor Kaufman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen. Councilmember Coombs.
Present.
Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Drinsky. Councilmember Lawson. Councilmember Marcano.
Present.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Mario. Councilmember Sundberg.
Here.
Councilmember Zvonek.
Here.
There's a quorum.
Very well. Then we'll start with 5-minute presentations. And we will start with, so the way it's going to work on the first half, going to be 5-minute presentations from each of the 5 presenters. And the presenters are Christina Ampon, Youth Violence Prevention Program Manager, Vanessa Wilson, Chief of Police. Outside speakers, Katie Snell, Aurora Mental Health, Greg Sazel, Aurora Public Schools, Director of Security, Guadalupe Flores, APS student. And so I believe Christina Ampron, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have access to share my screen, please. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about my program. I want to start out by introducing myself. My name is Christina. I'm the program manager for the Aurora Youth Violence Prevention Program. And I initially want to thank the city for taking a proactive approach to funding our program and supporting the work and all the efforts that we've so far moved forward, which is the first step to being able to address some of the youth violence that we're seeing. The mission of our program, as you see here, is to enhance public safety to reduce the impact of youth violence in Aurora communities. We're doing this through a comprehensive and proactive public health approach inclusive of youth, the community, partner agencies, and city leaders to address key factors. Essentially, this is the Aurora approach that we're looking to implement. We have done research around national and local practices and have found that in order for us to have a true impact in the violent behavior that we are seeing, and in order for us to be able to address the different risk factors that are impacting our youth, we do have to, as our state mission statement states, take a comprehensive approach that's inclusive of a multifaceted collective effort. If you look here, these are the different 5 areas of strategy that we're looking to implement. And again, as we move forward, it's important for us to have a balanced approach and be inclusive of primary prevention efforts, secondary prevention, intervention, and organizational change, but also be supportive of suppression efforts that law enforcement or some of our other criminal justice partners are implementing. If we're too heavy with one area and not focus on the other and have that balanced approach, we're not going to see the reduction that we're hoping to be able to have, or to have the level of impact on our youth and families that we want to be able to see. To start, we want to ensure that we're developing the infrastructure internally to be able to support not just short-term strategies, but how do we support a response that we can evolve or as time goes by? How do we develop a program and an initiative and the partnerships to be able to support the multi-year, multi-sector, and multi-level response that we are looking for? And that's both here with Aurora, but also regionally. We know that a lot of the violent behavior is going into Denver, but also Arapahoe, other parts of Arapahoe, other parts of Adams County. And so how do we enhance our approach to ensure that we're implementing the regional approach? recently I was talking to a representative from the ATF, and he highlighted the importance of having the regional approach and how they're tracking gun violence, and they're saying that there's gun incidents that where they're able to track the presence of that gun in several different counties, which highlights the importance of having that regional approach. We move then to the organizational change. So we know that capacity building, for example, is a very important action that we want to implement both internally, but also with external partners. How do we build the capacity of our partners to be able to understand the complexity of youth violence, but also understand best practices and be able to develop the capacity of our community to be able to do the work that we're looking for. We do plan on implementing a professional capacity training series for our internal and external partners. That way we can bring in some level of expertise, both from local partners and also national partners, to be able to speak to some of the approaches, but also be able to provide very specific information around what is a trauma-informed approach, what are risk factors, how do you work with a family unit, why is it important to provide supports not just to the youth but to the overall family, and how do you begin to notice, for example, some of the triggering that may come up and address some of the behavioral challenges that we're dealing with. It's also important for us to recognize that we may have to change certain practices or certain past procedures, and so how do we enhance some of the policies in place to support this work moving forward. That moves us into the reentry and the intervention category. We know that working with high-risk youth is critical, and that's where our partnerships with our county partners is important. Human services, for example. Also probation, pretrial, the municipal court, the district attorney's office. It's critical for us to be able to, and that's just to name a few, but it's important for us to identify those youth high risk and actively involved in some of the high risk behaviors, and provide and ensure that the services that are needed in place are available in our community. And if not, how do we address that gap? So we know that we've already identified very specific gaps in services that are needed to serve this specific population. So how do we ensure that we're looking for funding opportunities, looking to leverage resources, and also, again, increase capacity of the community to be able to provide very specific services. The reentry piece is also very instrumental. We know that a lot of youth, after being in detention, come out and it's a vulnerable time for them. So how do we ensure that they're prepared to come back into the community and ensure that they're not connecting back to some of the gang members, or that we're providing the supports in place to ensure that we're supporting some level of disassociation with the gang or other at-risk behaviors. Secondary prevention is more of that prevention effort where we're starting to identify those youth, those families that are struggling. Currently, we are working with the caseload made up of these youth, and what we're seeing is parents are wanting.
Ms. Ambrand, can you, first of all, be a little bit louder, and secondly, you're over time. You should have tailored your presentation to 5 minutes. Can you move forward a little faster?
Yes. Yeah, so the secondary prevention, we know that parents are wanting the support. They're wanting to learn this skill set to be able to support their youth that are exhibiting some at-risk behavior. And then lastly, prevention efforts. How do we ensure that we're addressing the needs of the overall community? These are very specific gaps in programming that we've identified. So the intervention, the secondary, and the primary prevention efforts that we're hoping to be able to move forward. And then lastly, the last thing is just partnering with our current internal partners and just highlighting, for example, the winter programming the Parks and recreational centers are offering to offer youth a safe space to be able to have during the winter break. Thank you.
Vanessa Wilson, Chief of Police, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Can you share my screen, Chris? Thank you. And give me a 1 minute warning, please.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Oh, gosh, I stand corrected. I'm very sorry. The presenters have 10 minutes each. And so I stand corrected. So you are now recognized for 10 minutes, Chief.
No. Okay, so I hopefully, Council and Mayor, you can see my screen. I can't see it on mine, but I have my notes I can go off of. Can you see it fine?
Can't see you yet. Not yet, Chief.
Okay, thank you, sir. No. Adrian, can you help us? Oh, here we go.
There we
Maybe.
go.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so I know just listening to Monday night session, specifically all the council members are interested in driving down violent crime within the city, which is our issue as the police department, as well as just immediate violence interrupters. I know that Councilmember Zvonek wanted to know about that. So I've tailored my presentation to immediate youth initiatives that we're facing. Then I will go into some next steps that I'm hoping that you as council and the city will support, which I think we can do well as a city together. So first, one of the major things that we're doing in the police department is through our crisis response team. And we've partnered with the DU Colorado Resilience Collaboration, the FBI, and also Homeland Security. And what this is Target Violence Prevention Program. And this is our crisis response officers go in and do trainings within our community, also go into the schools to train teachers as well as parents to be able to identify indicators that kids may be being swayed into violence. They may be trying to be indoctrinated into some sort of a gang or terrorist type situation. And so it's been very, very successful. We've been recognized as being a leader within the state of Colorado in this. And so I'm very proud of this program, as well as, real life instances where we have disrupted two actual plans that some youth had for active shooter situations within our city. Obviously, we're not going to go into those details of that, but the program is working, and I think we just need to continue to do that. Another thing, since the shootings have occurred in early November, we got together, we've created a Chiefs Youth Violence Advisory Team, and that's just really reaching out to the individuals that are already doing the work in our community. We have great people in the city of Aurora and nonprofits that are actually serving our youth right now. And so we need to leverage those relationships along with Christina Amparan and her group and make sure that we're supporting them as best we can. We're looking for every community engagement opportunity that we can have as the police, these groups that want us at the table, that want us to either be mentors within their organization, or they want to let us know when things are going on so that we can have high visibility, because really what the focus that we want is for kids to feel safe to come out, that feel safe in their community, where they feel like they don't have to pick up a gun in the first place. We're bolstering our responses at the schools. Since the shootings, obviously our SROs and gangs have had a high visibility within all the schools within the city of Aurora. And then we're making sure that we have really streamlined coordination between our intel and our specialty units. So when a safe detail comes in from the school, and I'm sure Mr. Cazell may talk about that in APS, that we are on that immediately. It's not something that's going to sit in an email. It's something that we're going to hit, whether it's 3 a.m. in the morning. Dispatch is going to make sure that we're notified and that we're looking at those schools, having those resources set up for that school threat. And then my intel group is, looking at everything as far as social media and what have you to identify those individuals and to contact them to try and interrupt that violence. We're also trying to identify and target our repeat offenders and the violence that we are seeing, unfortunately, in our community. And then we're trying to with enforcement, we have to take these kids off the street. Unfortunately, if they've gone to the point where prevention and interrupters have not succeeded, we are going to go ahead and take them off the streets as quickly as possible. And that's where my gang unit and my fugitive apprehension team comes in, so that we can, stop the violence as well as hold them accountable. And unfortunately, arrest is going to be a deterrence as well. When people know that we take this seriously and that we're going to use all of our resources, I'm proud to say that, we had the unfortunate shootings at the schools, and my team worked around the clock. We have 6 in custody, and we have 2 more warrants pending. So very quickly, just a little over a month, we've been able to identify the players in that, and then try to take them off the street. And 4 of them will be charged as adults. Obviously, that's not what we want to do in our community. We want to focus on youth violence prevention. We want to focus on deterrence and different diversion programs, and we're absolutely 100% behind that. But when it comes to the point where people are pulling triggers, then we have to use enforcement. I think Christina already talked about the community relations section is going to be working with her team and Parks and Rec to do our winter programming. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh Nicholas. If you could quickly, Josh, just talk about how your team is going to be helping with this over the Christmas break, holiday break.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening, everyone. Our community relations section is currently recruiting officers to assist on 3 fronts with this community programming happening at our recreation centers. First, we've heard from both teens and parents alike that they really want to see our officers engaged with youth and just everyday activities, getting to know one another and building that safe space. So we're creating opportunities for officers to go play some basketball, get involved in these cooking classes, and just learn more about the youth in our community and the challenges that they're currently facing. Secondly, we will have our new 22-foot custom-built gaming trailer, the 5.0 trailer, on site to provide youth with a chance to do what they love to do, play video games alongside officers, of course, have some good snacks and exchange some fun while they're at our rec centers. And then finally, we're also recruiting officers to support staff at the rec centers with security. In the event that something were to happen, we would have an immediate response at those rec centers.
Thanks, Joshua. And so I know that when you talk about community engagement, obviously we are committed to rebuilding trust within the community, but we really need to make endways with these youth and to let them know that there's people here within the organization that they can see us as human beings, they can feel as though they can trust us, and they can feel that it's either safe to talk to us directly or to give information to someone else to get that information to us. I've given a synopsis of a town hall meeting where one of our activists within the community actually slipped me a piece of paper with some information that a youth was afraid to come to me directly with. But with that information, we were able to take the offender that was violating this individual and having domestic violence issues and had felony warrants, and we were able to take that person off the street. So we need to think outside the box on how people can engage with the officers and how they can report crimes that they're concerned about. I'm sorry, I'm feeling hurried right now. So the Safe Havens, we've partnered with the youth violence prevention folks in the Salvation Army, as well as my community relations section. We're out in the community talking to them and having people realize that we're here to help them, and also talk about the resources that are out there. We're giving away gun locks and things of that nature. I've been in community town halls. I think that is very important for us to get the message out to parents in the community that we need their help. This is not just a law enforcement issue, and that we need them to be engaged in what their kids are doing. Ever since we had talked about the Hinckley shooting and I made that cry to the public, I'd like to say that we've had 2 parents that have found guns on their kids called us and had us come and take those into our possession to get them off the streets. So I need the parents to continue to do what you're doing. I appreciate those that are listening because we do need your help. Lastly, last March, we applied for the National Public Safety Partnership, and we were selected one of 10 cities across the nation. This is just going to be able to allow us to leverage all of our federal partners. We had a listening session on October 2nd, and we were able to have everyone around the table from ATF to the FBI to the U.S. Attorney's Office and to both Adams and Arapahoe County District Attorneys all say that we are committed to driving violence down in the city of Aurora, and we want to focus on the violence in our youth communities. With this public safety partnership, we're going to have direct connection with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and we're going to be able to see best practices across the nation and what's working in other cities. And I'm hoping that I can take Christina Aparan and Jessica Prosser and those with me to some of these site visits on cities that are doing it well. We have many cities across the country that we can go and look and see what they're doing, and hopefully it's going to be something that we can utilize here in the city of Aurora. So with that, I think I'll yield whatever little bit of time I have left.
Kathy Snell, Aurora Mental Health, you are recognized for 10 minutes.
take this opportunity just to chat briefly about some of the prevention and early intervention programs that Aurora Mental Health Center currently offers. Happy to be able to share those, and also just happy to be here to be part of the discussion and potentially part of the solution as we move forward. So I want to start by talking about our Aurora Youth Options Program. This is a program that started about 12 years ago that was actually really initiated by then Judge Weinberg from the Aurora Municipal Court in combination with several city council members to really look at how can youth who may be at risk be identified, and then how can services be offered to those youth before they hit the court system. So we took that challenge and built a model on the Communities That Care platform. This is a model that was created by the Social Development Research Group at the University of Washington. It's been well studied for several decades now, and really brings the community together to determine what are the specific needs of that community and what services could really most impact those needs. So the program that we initiated trains community gatekeepers, so folks who will have the opportunity to interact with youth in schools, in rec centers, in a variety, in churches, other facilities throughout the city, who can identify youth who may be beginning to show signs of struggle, and they can nominate them as participants in AYO. And once they've been nominated, we have youth specialists who complete a Communities That Care youth survey tool that is a studied tool to identify the risk and protective factors that youth may be struggling with. The risk factors that have been identified by research that lead to adverse outcomes. So the adverse outcomes from research are substance abuse, violence, delinquency, teen pregnancy, and school dropout. And there are risk factors along a continuum, including individual and peer risk, family risk, school risk, and community risk. The survey tool also identifies protective factors that really help to mitigate risk, and those fall into those same categories. So once that survey has been completed, and our research arm has created a profile, our youth specialists sit down with youth and their family as appropriate and review the results and talk about those risk factors, talk about the protective factors, and discuss recommendations for pro-social services to reduce risk and increase protective factors. More recent research really is showing that increasing protective factors is the strongest predictor of success. So building on protective factors that are already in place for youth and families. Then those youth specialists refer youth and support them with connecting to services across the city. We've categorized about hundreds of services that fit into these various categories. So they're specifically selected based on the profile. Within the survey, we identify behavioral health needs and substance use needs. So if a youth has needs in those areas, we make the appropriate referrals either into Aurora Mental Health Services or to other services available. And then we also added a mentoring program to our AYO menu because that has one of the strongest indicators of success for youth at risk. And we just couldn't find enough strong mentoring programs to refer youth to. So why do we do mentoring? It really effectively addresses multiple risk and protective factors simultaneously. A lot of meta-analytic research has shown that formal mentoring programs that follow a best practice model have a clear and very reliable impact on a range of social, academic, and behavioral outcomes, and that the emotional support gained in mentoring has a positive impact on aggressive behavior. So the mentoring programs that we offer have achieved a gold star status. They follow best practices. They include one-on-one mentoring, e-mentoring, group mentoring, academic, career development, and informal mentoring. So we seek volunteers from the community and plug those volunteers into the place that fits best for them, that can impact the most youth. One of the referral options, if a youth is identified with need for mental health services is our school-based therapy program. We do partner with Aurora schools, with Cherry Creek schools, and a number of charter schools, and embed 45 therapists in 73 schools. So those therapists are there to take referrals from the school. Youth can self-refer and families can refer. It really takes the barriers away from seeking mental health care. And we have partnerships with those districts that allow us to serve any youth who needs service, regardless of ability to pay, with no fees. And it also allows us, our therapists, to engage in whole school wellness so they can do prevention programs within a school. And finally, the partnerships we have with Aurora Police Department, the crisis response team, where we have therapists co-responding, and the mobile response team, where therapists are co-responding with EMS, really are opportunities to identify potentially challenging situations in the community and intervene in the moment, as well as to connect youth and families back into services following the contact in the community. So those are the main things I wanted to go over today. Certainly all of our programs are available across the community, but those programs most specifically address prevention for youth violence within our current service lines.
Thank you. Just to remind the members and to remind the panel that in the second half, members of City Council and myself will be allocated a specific amount of time to ask the panel members questions. And so next we have Greg, and you'll have to, I believe, Cazell, Aurora Public Schools Director of Security.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm able to present. The document I'm going to share with you today is our APS's Health and Safety Plan. This is really kind of a living, breathing document. It's about 50 slides, so I have asked that your staff present it to council, so you have that available, that you can kind of look at everything a little bit more in depth. It's important to know that our health and safety plan does come from the lessons learned, the tragedy at Arapahoe High School. And subsequent legislation and the Claire Davis Act that followed that. Talk a little bit about health and safety. We wouldn't have to do that with COVID-19, so there's a little bit of that in here. I'll skip over that and keep to the important parts. APS Cares, again, when we're looking at safety, we've got to show a holistic approach, a well-rounded approach. Comes with communication, awareness, relationships, engagement, and security. We utilize multiple channels to communicate with our community. That's those of you who may be on the call probably got a call from the district about 30 minutes ago. Social media, Facebook, all of those. We are constantly communicating with our parents and our partners about what's happening in APS. Awareness, all of our students and staff are aware of our emergency protocols. We're required to practice our drills annually. Again, that's an important part of us preparing when an emergency occurs. Relationships.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you speak up a little bit, please?
Yep, absolutely. Relationships. Again, being here today with you, being a partner in the community, partner with the Aurora Police Department, Aurora Fire Department, other social service organizations. Part of our CARES program are those relationships. Engagement. I'm here talking to you today, but there are teachers, counselors, school psychologists, social workers, you name it. They're all out there working hard. They're building trusting relationships with our students, making sure students feel comfortable to report any potential concerns. We know that if a student doesn't feel safe in their classroom, they're not going to do well on their tests. They're not going to achieve those goals that they're looking to achieve. So engagement is a huge component of that. Last but not least is security. The security team, important to remember, we're not law enforcement. We're campus safety. We respond to our schools, work together with our first responders to any potential threats when they're identified. We really have a two-pronged approach to health and safety. One is the social emotional. That includes our mental health and counseling support, health services support, and crisis support. On the other side of that, two-pronged approach is physical and infrastructure. Common response protocol, access control when you enter our schools, preparedness, planning, and training for emergencies. Our common mapping protocols, making sure that our buildings are well mapped. First responders can easily navigate through our buildings. Communication, I already spoke to that, a huge component. Our ongoing relationships with Aurora Police Department, Aurora Fire Department, the Office of Emergency Management, as well as our crisis response team and our technology, infrastructure, and network. Since the Aurora voters passed the 2018 bill, we've been able to increase our social, emotional, mental health support. I know Kathy's going to talk a little bit about this already, but we have 87 school counselors, 56 school psychologists, 109 social workers, 25 special service providers. They're at a little bit higher level of support for some challenging needs if we come across those. And then all of our schools have an Aurora mental health or Health One therapist that they have. This slide says unless they've turned it down, none of our schools have turned down that support. Again, important role for our social emotional health is our counseling, consultation for our staff and our families, multi-tiered system of support. So if we have a student who has a specific education plan, as well as some other emotional staff that they have, we're making sure that we're holistically supporting that student on all different levels. Risk assessment and support plans for development, referrals for families seeking outside resources. Again, we'll work with our families and make sure if we are not the appropriate mental health and support for their student, that we'll work with them in getting to those resources, and crisis support for any district-related or community-related emergency. You know, our mental health team has worked with an electronic referral system. Again, community partners with Aurora Mental Health, Children's Hospital, and Health One. If our students are a victim of a crime, we work very closely with the Aurora Victims Assistance Fund and making sure we're providing access to those expertise within the police department. Colorado Crisis Services, again, something else that we're getting out to our staff and students, which is that 24/7 crisis support. If a student needs to talk to somebody and it's 1 a.m., these are the directions that they have to reach out and seek that mental health support. Talk a little bit about our health services. Those are our wonderful nurses that are within the district. Every P8 middle and high school has is staffed by a full-time registered nurse. At our elementary schools, they have internet nurses that travel, may be responsible for 2 or 4 different elementary schools. Again, our nurses are collaborating with our school staff and assessing our students, whether it's mental health needs, a medical need, or substance abuse. Our nurses are doing incredible work. Again, they also help our families enroll with health insurance programs and all-around expertise. They are experts in child abuse and neglect, as well as participate in suicide and threat assessments for our students. When we talk about physical infrastructure safety, we're talking about common response protocol. Again, these are the language that we have worked with the city and the police department on. So our language and Cherry Creek's language is the same. Secure perimeter, lockdown. Many times our patrol officers, they don't know necessarily whether they're going to a Cherry Creek school or an Aurora school. So common terminology is important when they're responding to an event in our schools. Access control, again, all of our buildings are locked. Staff, visitors can only come through that front door. We got, of course, mask protocol currently because of COVID-19. All of our interior doors are locked, and staff is able to exit and enter the buildings through electronic control devices. We screen all of our visitors that come into our building through a system called Raptor. That system checks the national database for registered sex offender. We want to know who's coming into our building. We want to make sure that they're safe to be around our students. This is our emergency preparedness and planning. Ongoing support for our site leaders so they know what to do in the event of an emergency. Annual inspections. We work closely with the Aurora Fire Department on our fire drills. Everything that we have to do to prepare for an emergency, so when it occurs, it's second nature to us. Being a first responder is not something that educators sign up for, but it's a reality. They have to be proficient in knowing what to do when an emergency occurs. Again, a little bit about my team. We're not police officers, we're campus safety. We have one person specific for emergency preparedness. Our dispatch center operates 24 hours a day. We have 11 campus safety officers that patrol the district, respond to any emergency. But there are those times, again, where we're going to need law enforcement support. Those things that we can't handle on our own, we will. 61 campus monitors, site-based at all of our middle school and high schools. Talked a little bit already about our school resource officers. This slide actually says 8. We're thankful for Chief Wilson. We were able to get 2 more, so every one of our comprehensive high schools has 2 SROs assigned to them. We work closely with the PAR officers, the neighborhood officers that are in and around our schools. Aurora Fire Department, again, another partner, keeps our schools safe from a fire prevention perspective, as well as provides fire safety and education for our younger students. Our incident response team, that's a multifaceted team that comes together when an incident occurs. You know, whether that's a prolonged secure perimeter or a lockdown, whether it's a missing student, this team comes together and is trained to make sure that we keep the district running, as well as address any emergencies. This is a living, breathing document. It's subject to change generally twice a year. We're never satisfied at status quo. We always want to be looking to do better. And these are just really kind of some of our ongoing next steps. Again, from the 2016 bond, we were able to construct secure vestibules at 28 of our schools. We've updated our security cameras, our public address systems, fire suppression systems. Again, with 67 schools, it's an ongoing process to make sure that we are safe and prepared for any emergencies. There's a lot of other information on the appendix. Again, provided that to your staff for them to review. But at that point, I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for the presentation. There's been a change in terms of the student, and so our student presenter will be Kiara Padilla, assuming I'm saying her first name right. Kiara, you are now recognized for 10 minutes.
Right. So, hello, my name is Kiara Padilla. I am part of Christina Amperan's Youth Violence Prevention Program, and I am also a APS student. So some of the ways that I found that we can connect more with the community to prevent these types of youth violence is to connect our youth to adults and activities like after school programs, mentoring programs, to create a stronger connection between our community and students. We can create protective community environments like safe havens and modify that physical and social environment so we could reduce that stress, and we could create more outreach. And then we can also try to connect more as a community as a whole. So bring more programs in, bring specialists in, and we can get parents to support this as well, the community, schools, and everybody in general. A forum that parents and families can connect and help prevent this youth violence is we can talk with our teens about violence and how we can support them. We can reach out to local programs and educate our parents and families on how they can help support youth violence and how they can prevent it and how they can find those ways that it affects our community. Some ways that communities can help support this is they can create mentoring, they can create leadership programs, and just overall have a stronger connection, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental health support. The way community can do this is they can promote healthy and safe neighborhoods. So going back to our safe havens, we can talk about how we can provide those services to the community. We can provide more support overall with more resources. And a way that we can do this is we know that a lot of families are struggling out there, and that's one of the main causes for youth violence violence. So because we have so much violence, we can start by going into homes. And this would look like giving our parents more resources, because sometimes parents don't have those resources for health, for mental health, for renting and all that. So I feel like that takes out puts out stress on our teens, which leads them to that violence that they create in the community. I also wanted to talk about how many resources that we have, people don't have access to, whether it's because of their race or their legal status. It affects how they can create this and all that. For example, I have a Hispanic mother who doesn't have a legal status, and because of this, she can't apply to many resources or has access to those resources because of those language barriers, because of those statuses and all that. So I feel like if we broke down that boundary of those resources having such a strong boundary between families, languages, and statuses, I feel like it would also help prevent youth violence. And we can make more strategies that are effective to stop this youth violence in our community. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for council members to question members of the panel, and council members will be allotted 5 minutes to ask as many questions as they want. If in fact they're able that they are able to ask a question, but there's not enough time for the respondent to answer the question, I will allow more time. And if there is additional time, we'll divide it up equally and do a second round. For the first round, this first round, I recognize Councilmember Lawson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Wilson, I just had a question for you. So just with myself reaching out with teens and youth in our community, you know, some of them have gained a trust with me. So I see some of the things and I see some of the things that are going on right now that I'm kind of concerned about. A lot of the youth maybe want to report things. Is there a thought about maybe some type of investment of an anonymous type of hotline or something where the youth can call and feel secure, because they could be, you know, there could be retaliation against them for, you know, ratting people out, just saying whatever. So I just wanted to know, I know you might have something like that, but a lot of youth don't feel comfortable maybe calling that or feeling comfortable with, maybe they want to report things, they want to say things, but they want to have that anonymous or some type of security that if they do report something, they would feel safe in doing that. So I just wanted to ask you, do you have something like that, or is it something that could be more extensive on that level?
Yes, ma'am. So with the school systems, we do have what we call Safe to Tell, and we get tips all the time about, and mostly it's focusing on violence within the schools. But I think you're absolutely right, ma'am. I think we should explore just a general number through the police department. We do have people calling in and being anonymous. They don't want police to contact them. They're reporting it, but they don't want to be contacted by us. But I think that, you know, if it's something that's easier, maybe we look at, kids are using apps. Maybe we look at, we have text to 911 and things like that. But maybe we look at an app that they feel that can be safe, that they can report what's going on. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to make it easier for kids to get a hold of us if they don't want to be identified.
Yeah, and I wondered, I know that I think something like that would be great. I understand they do it through the schools, Chief Wilson, but there's some things that just happen not within the schools, but there's just a lot of things going on in general. And I think something like that to expand it where it's just kind of a line where they could just report something. I think you might see some people, a lot of kids maybe doing that. It is a fear of retaliation, bullying. There's a lot of pressure, but I just really feel like that maybe should be extended even beyond the schools. And so I was wondering if that could be some type of investment that the police department could do or think about. So
absolutely, ma'am. I think, we can talk offline in greater detail if you'd like, but I think that's a great idea and something that we'll definitely explore.
Okay, thank you. And then for Kiara, thank you for coming in and expressing your giving us some thoughts about how we could curtail this violence in our city. I guess for you, what I wanted to ask you, just being a youth in the community, do you think that you're hearing a lot? You have all these adults and everybody's trying to say what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Do you think that the adults are hearing you, hearing the youth, and what is really going on and how we can actually curtail this problem? Because a lot of the youth are involved in this, and I just feel like a lot of times we just have all these public officials, everybody, making these recommendations because they're turning this issue into a political issue, and it shouldn't be. It's a public crisis. So I just wanted to know from your perspective, do you think that we're hearing enough of the youth voices and what is needed and what is really, really happening, especially within its gangs? It's just a lot of different perspectives. So can you provide me your perspective on that?
Hello, yes, thank you. So I think that overall our adults are listening to our voices, but we need more youth to advocate and to be that leader and be that change so other youth around the community can see that it's okay to speak up and be vocal about these issues and not keep it like as a hidden issue that's normalized in our country. I also feel that with the strategies that I stated, that we can use a lot of those, like creating those safe havens, having that outreach with with the community, being aware more in the community, and having more resources that we can all connect to, so we can all support each other and stop this youth violence.
Mayor, I don't know how much more time I have. I'm sorry, I haven't kept track.
You have a minute, 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Greg, for APS schools, there's just, I know that you're not you're looking at, there's a lot of things that are transpiring, through social media, and a lot of this stuff is going on. How are you kind of tracking that? I mean, in terms of, I know that you might notice some things on Facebook, but just the interactions with kids, just kind of the tension that is happening with bullying, with just whatever is just happening within the school system. How are you able to track that, and what can we do better in that effort to maybe see if we can get something before it actually happens? And I know you're sending out emails and but there's a lot of stuff that's just happening. Kids are beefing just on Facebook, on social media, on apps. I'm just trying to figure out a way that maybe the schools can be a little bit more proactive on some of those things that are happening within the schools. So maybe we can prevent some of the violence.
Sure, absolutely. And Facebook is a challenge for us in education. There's so much going on. It's tough to overcome. We take it back down to the granular of a trusted relationship with an adult who's willing to reach out and convey what those situations are so it can be addressed. I won't get into Chief Wilson's lane, but some of these pop-up parties that are occurring at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're using social media to advertise that. And then, nothing good is gonna come out of that when we're meeting at a hotel in the city at 1 o'clock in the morning for 16-year-olds. So it's a challenge. We are getting that information. Students are stepping up because it is impacting their ability to feel safe in the community. So we do have strong students that are stepping up. clearly not enough. But it's tough because those social media posts, you know, they're there for a second and then they disappear. And it's tough to track all of that. And without a trusted adult that's going to come forward, without a student coming forward to a trusted adult, it makes our jobs difficult in the school.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Councilmember Gardner, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. Is Councilmember Gardner present, Katie?
I believe he's having connectivity issues.
Okay, I'll move back to him. Councilmember Zvonek, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to kind of be somewhat rapid fire so I can get questions out. Chief Wilson, this first question I have is for you. How much of the uptick that we've seen in youth violence do you believe is related to gangs?
So that's a really good question, sir. And so when we look at the way we've got to change the way we look at things, right? So we need to look at our traditional gangs of what people think are gangs, right? Crips and Bloods and all that. It's completely changed. And we're seeing now that groups of kids, we're calling them groups now instead of gangs. They're groups of kids that might live in the same neighborhood, go to the same school, and they just decide that they're going to create this union or this group that they have allegiances to. So the Colorado Office of Gang, the COG, we have to have specific things to identify someone as a gang member or a gang to say that they're actually an official gang. And so I think we need to look at a better way of tracking that. So quick answer to your question is it's hard to track now because gangs have really changed what the traditional gang definition is. So I think that's something we need to look at with our partners, with the FBI, again, with the PSP program that we're getting into, of what's the best way to track this so that we really can tell what is gang motivated.
And related to this, and regardless of what we're calling them these days, what you would call a gang unit, I know that a lot of the specialty units within APD have had to be depleted as a result of the need to pull people onto patrol. What is the current number of people that you have dedicated to the gang unit in APD?
So right now we've combined what we call the gang GRIT unit, which is gang robbery intervention team. And so we've taken our detectives from the gang unit and put them into the GRIT group. So we have 8 investigators in the GRIT, the gang robbery investigation team. And then we have it right here in front of me. We have 4 officers and 1 sergeant. Obviously, with a city this size, I would love to be able to triple that number. But right now the staffing is such that, we're unable to, but everyone is committed. And, with our fugitive apprehension team, our narcotics team, our SWAT team, if gangs identifies a problem or a violent offender within our city, then we bring all those resources to go after that person and take them into custody and try to interrupt and apprehend.
And I appreciate what seems to be the cross collaboration between the various specialty units within the department. But I think what you said there is something that's important. Is that the focus of this tonight? I mean, this is the second time now in 3 nights that we've talked about youth violence in our city, and it's obviously a critical issue. But the fact of the matter is that you said you need at least 3 times the amount of officers on the gang unit in order to address this. One of the problems that I see right now, and this is maybe addressed to both you and Christina, is that as I listen to this program, and I'm new, and so forgive my ignorance, and I might be missing some things, but as I hear this presentation, one of my concerns is the disconnect between the prevention, intervention, and any sort of focused deterrent strategy. And I understand that you all are doing something. I appreciate you highlighting that, but it seems like from the overall youth prevention program, it's almost separate, and they should be hand in glove. And I view prevention and intervention as more of a mid to long-term strategy, but deterrence, and especially as it relates to law enforcement, is addressing the problem we have today, where we have this uptick in violence. I just looked at some numbers from our district attorney. We're seeing this uptick, more kids committing crimes, and yet the number of juvenile case filings is down 50%. And so I just want to know specifically, Chief, I think and other members of council are going to want to hear from you what it is that you need to make sure that on the deterrent side, we're doing everything we can to prevent this.
So obviously, we have to look at our staffing problems, and we have to look at how we retain the officers, the great men and women that we have here today. And I think that we also are seeing between the police department and the youth violence prevention program, I think we are seeing that we need to collaborate more and that we need to be at the seat at the table together. And so I think that we're going towards that. So we are making sure that we're talking, that we're engaging with one another, and that we're all on the same page as far as moving forward. But enforcement is definitely our role in trying to deter it. And so, you know, I've had great success with city management giving me overtime funds to try and put proactive teams and operations together. But again, we are lacking staffing right now to be able to, you know, fully staff our gang units and other specialty units, sir.
And look, with all due respect, Chief, I appreciate that you want to collaborate with the youth violence prevention team, but candidly, I think that law enforcement and the PD is the third leg of the stool with prevention and intervention. And I know that Councilmember Lawson talked about wanting to move it out of its current position into something where it would be more integrated with public safety. I think this is speaking to that point that we don't have enough of the deterrence focused strategy integrated into it. And so I guess, you know, Christina, I guess this question is for you, is in what ways do you think that there can be a greater level of involvement with the police department when it comes to deterrence? So that, because right now, and I know it says this in the mission statement, that we're going to focus on reducing the impact of youth violence, but the real mission should be to reduce youth violence, period, full stop. So I want to reduce the impact of it, but I want to reduce it. And I think that we don't do that without having APD more involved in this. So I guess I'd like to know, Christina, is there plans to not just collaborate, but actually make this a part of the youth violence prevention program?
And yes, I hear everything you're saying, and APD is actively a part of the overall program. And I think that a lot of what we've been looking to is having them take the lead on helping deter and helping take that law enforcement lead, and how we're helping complement the work that APD is doing. Is not just through the community engagement unit, but it's working with their specialized units, so the gang unit, crimes against children, victim services. So as they're identifying those youth most high risk or involved in an incident where there's a nexus connecting the incident to a gang or violent crime, that they're referring those individuals to us, and we're providing very different support to the youth and the family. And that's how we will help deter future behaviors or possible retaliatory behaviors. It is important that we also recognize the prevention and intervention efforts, and in order for the youth violence prevention program to have some level of impact, it is important for us to have some level of separation from law enforcement, so we aren't seen as law enforcement, that we truly stay as a separate effort. So if we do have those youth, for example, that Councilmember Lawson mentioned, where they want to outreach and they're concerned about retaliatory behaviors, that they're more responsive to us and we can help with that system navigation, and that we can take on some of those supports that as a law enforcement entity, APD won't be able to.
Councilmember Zvonek, your time has expired.
Okay.
Councilmember Jurenski, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I first want to ask Chief Wilson, you know, we talk about a staffing shortage right now. Do you feel our gang unit has ever been fully staffed?
Not to meet the situations that they're facing. I don't think that they are. I mean, the gang unit not only has to go out and build relationships and to build intel so that we know what gangs are active in our community, but they also need to be able to go out and suppress this activity and to put these people in jail and to, you know, take down this organization and, you know, cut the legs out from underneath it. So I would say no, we probably haven't been we haven't. You know, for a long, long time, when I first started, we said we didn't have a gang problem in the city of Aurora. And so I think that everybody's eyes are open to the fact that, you know, that gangs or these groups that are being, that are out there are really perpetuating a lot of the violent crime here in our city.
Right. And to me, whether we're talking about gangs or a gang mentality, you know, going on with these groups, it's very important to me that I understand what the staffing needs are in this gang unit. You said triple the size of 4 officers, and what did you say, 1 sergeant?
So usually the span of control is about 7 people. So, I mean, if I could have a vibrant gang unit I would love that. Right now, I'm just answering, we're really struggling to answer calls for service with the violent crime uptick that we've seen not here in the city, but across the nation. And so obviously, if we had more people working on that specific situation, I'd always welcome that, ma'am.
And would you be willing to look at, Christina had just mentioned that she thinks it's necessary to have their involvement so that it's not, it's not just law enforcement, but do you think within the gang unit or something in your department that there's some sort of outreach program that we could have with the gang unit, so it's not just always showing up as law enforcement, still uniformed officers, but do you think that's something that we could look at too?
Ma'am, we used to have what we call the GREAT training, gang resistance through education training. And I think Christina mentioned bringing that back. Denver has the GRIT program that seems to be very successful working with DPD. So I think outreach is extremely important. I think to Ms. Padilla's point that, we need to have people that the kids want to talk to that can go out and maybe squash and mediate some of these beefs that are happening within the youth. And they're going to listen to adults that they trust, and it may not be law enforcement. So I do believe that is a component, ma'am, that we could utilize, and whether that be with her group or some sort of civilianized unit that has that expertise of going out and being able to really engage with the youth and interrupt and mediate some of these problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see this as a public safety issue.
I do, because I think that obviously our youth are dying, and we have 42 homicides in the city of Aurora. So the violent crime has increased, and that's why we reached out to bring in all of our federal partners, because we realize we need everyone at the table to squash this problem, and to have the resources to look at what we're doing, to have assessments of what we're doing, if we need to do it better and more efficiently, and if we need better technology to help us combat crime, that's what we're going to work with them to do.
Well, I just want to echo that I absolutely agree with you that this is a public safety issue and we need to address it and classify it as such. I also want to ask, are you familiar with a program called Camp Postcard?
Yes, ma'am. We participate in Camp Postcard every year.
Okay, Aurora sends a handful of officers.
Yes, ma'am. We have a pretty robust group that goes up there. Our officers love to volunteer. It's a really great program that they're excited about and want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. I find it a real shame, and this isn't on you, but I would have liked to have seen a presentation on Camp Postcard tonight for any of my colleagues that aren't familiar with Camp Postcard, because I believe that this takes law enforcement out of it. What the police interaction is with these kids, and it also too gets them out of their element. So it gets them out of Aurora. We're not talking about we're building pop-up yoga studios or basketball courts. This gets them out of their element, out of Aurora, takes them to the mountains in plain with men and women that are officers in plain clothes, and after a full weekend of bonding, engagement, all of this with these kids, they then at the very end of this weekend come out in their uniforms as officers, and some of these kids are mind blown. Now I do understand that Camp Postcard gets these kids younger, maybe in elementary school, and I guess I would just like to say, if there was a way to get Camp Postcard to some of these older kids, but also I would like to explore something with the city, and I certainly would stand behind funding, city funding, just to a program like this that maybe went to older kids. But I would like something put out about Camp Postcard.
Yes, ma'am. And if you'd like, we could bring that to Public Safety Committee in the coming year and have a presentation on it for all of council.
Yes, I would sure appreciate it, and I don't have any other questions, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Jurenski. Councilmember, I don't believe that Councilmember Murillo, I think she has an excused absence. She informed me earlier that she would not be able to make it. Has that changed? Is she present? Okay, very well. Councilmember Sundberg, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank Kiara for the courage to speak to all of us in a public setting as an APS student. I was just looking at the definition of a gang. It says a group of adolescents who band together, especially a group of delinquents. But I understand how the makeup and look of a gang has changed. Chief Wilson, in these last high-profile shootings near the schools, were they gang-related in that sense? Both of them?
So one, the Hinckley shooting did have a gang nexus, sir, and the other unfortunate shooting, I think that's going to be more defined as a group of kids that hung together and kind of created this alliance, and it was a beefing between students, sir.
Gotcha. And there was an organization called AGRIP, Aurora Gang Reduction Impact Program, that had many stakeholders involved. It was very established. And I believe that went away with the loss of funding with the red light program loss in the city of Aurora.
That is correct, sir.
Do you think the loss of that organization was unfortunate? Was it needed? Was it valuable?
You know, a lot of people wanted to know exactly how many things we prevented. Obviously, prevention is, you know, we can't put a number on it. But I think it was a very positive program. And unfortunately, we were not able to fund that after the photo red light went away. And so at the time, the chief at the time decided that we would cut that program because we wanted to make sure that we still had our Explorer program, which is amazing and just getting kids to want to become police officers, as well as our Aurora for Youth.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the efforts and the connections you were attempting to make in the community, whether it's the trailer with the gaming, and I see that as being very practical. It's so nice to hear about very practical things, whether it's parents getting involved in schools, dads walking hallways, which you hear about in another state. Thank you. And I wanted to ask Kathy Snell a question regarding mentoring. Kathy, where are you finding your mentors, and do you feel you have enough of them currently?
We never have enough mentors. I think that we have a lot of word of mouth from current mentors to new mentors. We also do activities in the community. We find groups that are naturally convening and offer to come and talk to the groups about mentoring and seek volunteers there. We do friend raisers, which is kind of a way for people to bring friends in to learn about mentoring. So there's just a variety of really community-focused activities that we do to try to engage mentors. Includes the faith community, business community, schools, wherever we can go.
Yeah, it's really great when you can match a youth up to their interests.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best practices. And we were funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for several years. And one of the studies we did was how to make the best matches. And we really kind of built on the research that was already there and learned a lot about what are the best ways to match for the long-term, you know, at least 2-year mentoring matches for kids.
Thank you for the work you're doing. And Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Sundberg. Councilmember Medina, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, a couple questions for Chief Vanessa Wilson. What do you think about community being more engaged? How would you like to see that happen? Or what would you want more of?
Well, I think that we have quite a few, you know, groups out there that are already engaged in the community. And I think as a city, we need to bring them all together and have us all have a focus, right? And to make sure that we're supporting them with whatever, you know, funding that they may need. I mean, with the PSP program, we're going to have some, you know, funding opportunities that I hope we can tap into to support some of the people that are doing it. But yeah, the community has to be involved. You know, I've heard, the compound of compassion, I believe that I said that correctly, talking about wanting parents to, you know, be invited into the schools and patrol the hallways, along with, you know, the SRO presence. Obviously, we still need police in our schools, and I believe that because we see too many tragedies across the nation. But I think parents having more of a involvement is extremely important. And then, of course, you know, Councilmember Sundberg talked about going back to having this. You know, the gang resistance program where we have mentors and outreach workers going out and then having people report back to us, reporting back, you know, tips or reporting back that, hey, you know, these two groups are fighting, and information that might not rise up to my level, but can at least put it on the radar of my gang unit as well as my patrol officers that are out there to be on the lookout for these things.
And a couple things. I was part of AGRIP back in the day over at Moorhead Recreation Center. So I know certainly that program worked very well. I mean, like I said, I participated as part of that group and part of that organization. Also, some of the things we also did, which I think we can currently do now, and just look at, that's why I want to look at the rec centers currently, is we used to host 1 day a week where some police officers came and they did all the programming for our youth there. At the center on every Wednesday. So, you know, it was pretty well attended. We had a couple hundred kids that would go, and officers would take kids that wanted to lift weights or some that wanted to play soccer or a variety of different things. Because again, I think it's that relationship, right? Of a lot of these communities that we're going into, the only time that positive interaction with the police a lot of times is when somebody's getting arrested, right? And so they see that growing up and throughout their life, and that's kind of the interaction that they get. And so I want to kind of see more of that interaction as well, so that they see them as people, right? That they're just doing a job like everybody else. The other thing is, you know, we used to do teen nights there at the rec center across the way at the city owned Fletcher Elementary School and the gym. So we used to do that with police officers and staff, and have teen nights where we'd have teens come from about 9 o'clock till about midnight, and we would have, you know, pickup games that they would have and a variety of different things for you know, young men and young women to be able to do. So you know, those are things that I think that we need to do more of, so that we can create those opportunities, you know, for people to engage and interact in a positive way. So again, thank you for that. Kiara, I have a couple questions. Thank you for your information around, you know, you talked about, you know, the status, and do you feel that there's a fear in your community with police?
I feel like there is a fear of the police because of immigration statuses and all that. For example, I knew of a parent who her child was almost abducted, and because she didn't have the resources, the language, or the status, she didn't make a police report or anything because she felt like something was going to happen to her just for speaking out.
Okay. And just the last thing, you know, I see the mentoring, and as far as Aurora Youth Options, I have been a mentor of AYO, so I have certainly mentored youth through that program. It is very well worth that time. And as a coach as well, I see a lot of the interaction, and a lot of the things that I say are, we need more mentors who we need to mimic what we want kids to do, right? I'm in charge of a lot of young men from a variety of backgrounds. A lot of it is also fees, money, resources that kids need that they can't join a lot of these functions because of money. And we need to figure out ways to help these families so that they can participate. I pay for a lot of things, shoes, fees for kids that can't, just because it keeps them in a place that I know is positive. And then the other thing I try to mimic is leadership. My kids, I have my leaders make sure that kids that are struggling in there, or who may be kind of an oddball kid in their room, to make sure that they go after every practice and let them know that they did a really good job, because that's what I expect of my leaders. I expect them to lead by example, and I try to mimic that as well, as give them the opportunity and the authority to be able to be those mentors as well, because I'm a firm believer that kids will follow other kids if they follow the right way, right? There's two different ways that kids can go. And we need more people, you know, in our community to be more active. So thank you.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
All right, and that's all I've got, Mayor.
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilmember Medina. Councilmember McConnell, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. And I want to thank everyone for being here this evening and briefing us. I do have some questions here. I'm going to start with Greg and Kiara with this one. I've been told by the city's youth violence prevention program and also by a few community members that some of our youth don't feel comfortable or safe necessarily reaching out to their teachers or, you know, counselors in schools about some of the issues that they're experiencing with their peers, or the issues that maybe even their parents are having at home. And I'm curious if you have heard this concern as well, or Kiara, if you or anyone you know has experienced this, and then what can we do, you know, I guess from APS's side to course correct here?
Kiara, did you want to answer that first?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So I think I have heard of that being an issue, just because I feel like a lot of our youth feel like they don't have a voice or they don't have the capacity to get a resource or create change. I feel like a way we can do that is adapt maybe a group of people or an area specifically where people can reach out to, specifically youth, um, so they can show that need and that concern, and we can get maybe feedback on that and see how we can adapt it to schools or environments and all that.
Okay, and when you say a group of youth, are you saying a group of like youth who would be like intermediaries here, Kiara? Is that kind of the idea?
I think it is, as well as specialists in that know what they can do to help support that youth so they can get the help they need.
Thank you. And Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier that, you know, having a trusted adult is probably the highest on our list. You know, someone that student can go to. We're constantly checking with students, making sure that they do have that outlet. You know, threw up a little while ago, Safe to Tell, and again, Safe to Tell is developed in Colorado, following the tragedies at Columbine, and that has now, you know, gone across the country as an outlet to report, you know, anything that might be concerning for a student, you know, so drugs or alcohol or something that may be happening on campus. But that doesn't account for that trusted adult, right? That trusted adult who might be able to direct that student to some personal resources or some family resources. So again, our goal in APS is to have every student have a trusted adult. That continues to be a challenge that we're working on.
Great, thank you. So my next couple of questions are going to be for you, Kiara. So earlier you mentioned some of the things that are working and that you want to see more of. You mentioned safe havens, opportunities for mentorship, and you also threw out community schools. And I'd like to know what that means to you.
Something that means to me is having parents more involved, having educators more involved, having principals more involved, and having students in the building more involved as well. So, for example, creating that safe space for students to come in and support each other, make healthy choices, learn to become a leader, and know that they have a voice that could create change in their community and in their school.
All right. And is this something that you're thinking of like just during school hours or like an extension of?
I feel like we could do it during school hours since we have more youth in school during the school hours, and outside of school hours, I feel like everybody at the end of the day just wants to go home and doesn't really pay much attention to the opportunity. So I feel like school hours would be better.
Okay. You also mentioned that there are families who are struggling and that this is, I think you said, the root of a lot of the violence that we see. Can you talk about a little more about some of those struggles? You listed a bunch, so I got like struggles paying rent. And then you also said that there was stress at home that impacts youth. And can you elaborate on what that means in your experience?
Yes. In my experience, I've seen that many families have struggled because of that language barrier. Not only that, but I feel like when there's violence already between both mother or father or just the parents in the household, it creates a negative environment for our youth. And that negative environment may lead to emotional changes, physical changes that affect them, and they don't know how to get that out, so they resort to violence. So, as well as not only that, but I feel like overall, when you see something in your household or in your community and you see that it's constantly affecting people, you don't know what to do that much, but you also don't know if you can create that change.
Okay. And what would you see as something beneficial that we could do that we're not already doing on that front then?
I think that something beneficial that we could do to help this is reach out to more parents and reach out to siblings, reach out to like a whole family in general and see what needs they need so we can prevent this violence.
And Mayor, how much time do I have left here?
Your time has expired.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cruz, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So my first question, just really quickly to Greg, you mentioned Safe to Tell a few times. Is there language access on Safe to Tell, like other than English language?
Absolutely. You can access Safe to Tell 3 ways. You can download the app. You can call and actually talk to the equivalent of a 911 dispatcher. They're more of an analyst. And you can submit a tip via the web. And so all of those components have multiple languages. I put Safe to Tell link in the chat. If you were to go to that, up in the right-hand corner is a drop down for different languages.
Great, thank you. And Kiara, do you feel like young people are aware of that language access within that app and aware of that app and program as something they can use to report when issues are taking place?
I think there are many people who have that awareness, but I feel like they still don't report because they feel like it's not anonymous and maybe like something could come back at them, you know, if they report.
Okay, do you think there's anything that would help address that? Like are there things that can be built in that would make people feel like, yeah, actually I can put something here and it's not going to come back to me?
I'm not really sure what we can do as of now to make it more so people feel like it's actually anonymous and nothing will come back directed at them.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then going back to Ms. Snell's presentation regarding the increasing of protective factors, you talked a lot about what you can do within the mental health world to address or to increase protective factors. And yet we know that some of these protective factors around crime victimization or participation are not kind of within the purview of a lot of the folks that are here today. And those include healthy prenatal and childhood development, participation in traditional healing and cultural activities, stable housing, and steady employment. So do folks, and this can be any of the panelists, have ideas of what we can do within our capacity as city leaders to address those concerns that are kind of in our purview, but maybe not yours?
Yeah, you know, I think that when we look at protective factors, we are looking across those that are static, essentially, that we can't address, and those that are malleable or dynamic, and really trying to look for activities, you know, after school activities, social activities, sports, any kind, whatever is the right match for that youth, to get that youth involved in those activities that are going to best address those factors for them. So that's one piece where AYO, not mental health services, can really tries to address increased protective factors. That's just one piece there.
I would say what's something that the YVP can do is through the work of the outreach specialist, which is very similar to what was done through AGRIP, through the use of outreach workers. It's essentially the same thing, but providing that individualized approach, assessing the risk factors, assessing the potential of protective factors, and providing the support to connect to services, entities, or resources that can increase those protective factors. And the individualized approach is key, because not every youth will benefit automatically from going into pro-social activities. Some youth may benefit more from direct mental health, others from substance use, others from addressing the victimization, which is very critical, important for us to have that outreach support in order for us to identify what the main risk factor is, address that to stabilize, and then address the other factors. The other thing is having our multidisciplinary team that we're in the process of developing to ensure that we have Aurora Mental Health, Department of Human Services, criminal justice agencies at the table so we can ensure that we're not duplicating efforts, but we're providing that wraparound support to the individual and also the parent, and identifying what supports does the caregiver need to ensure that the youth is also successful. Sometimes parent is the one that's being victimized through a domestic violence relationship, and that's impacting the youth, so addressing those factors. And then lastly, just ensuring that we're also leveraging resources. So if Aurora Mental Health can say, I can do A, B, and C, we can take care of take a different focus, and then rely on other partners to ensure that they can do what they can do.
Great. And then, so from, I think, really anyone who's providing this support, which I think is mostly Christina, your program, and Kathy, yours, when one of the factors that's identified is unstable housing or unstable employment and lack of economic opportunity, what are the kinds of wait times and barriers that you see for community members attempting to access those types of resources that increase protective factors?
Yeah, I would say right now what we're seeing is more so on the side of the parents, them having not necessarily issues finding employment, but more so barriers with transportation. In the past, another challenge has been access to employment and the issue with having illegal status here and not being able to access, or also having certain criminal charges in someone's criminal history that may prevent employment. The other challenge with housing, I would say, especially with the work with youth that I've done, isn't necessarily for parents to find stable housing. It's more so the youth running away. Or the youth experiencing some level of victimization within the home, whether it's direct child abuse, witnessing domestic violence, or living in a home where there's generational gang involvement. And so working with our departments of human services to identify what is the best housing option for that youth to ensure that there's a safety component lens that we're taking.
Councilmember Coombs, your time has expired.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember, is Councilmember Gardner available at this time?
No, I do not see him, Mayor.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to everyone for the presentations. I'll start first with Chief Wilson. You know, I do think that this is definitely, obviously, a public safety issue. And I think I also agree with some of my colleagues in terms of I know we're recruiting officers and we're trying to retain the officers that we have, but once we get to a better staffing level, I would like to see us staff up the gang unit to be able to deal with some of these situations. My question is, I know, you know, the AGRIP went away with the photo red light, and now we're trying to incorporate it within this program. When did DARE go away? Maybe I'm so old, I don't remember. But it was a program a long time ago for drug abuse.
There was, and they kind of shifted away from the DARE programming and went to this great programming. But it's funny that you mention it. We just yesterday, Rocky Mountain HIDA is sponsoring what they're calling Law Enforcement Against Drugs and Violence. Wow. And so I'm going to be trying to get our officers into this program. It's free to us, and it teaches our cops to be able to go into the schools and even in engagement with kids on the street and talk about how to avoid, you know, drugs and violence. And so that's a new program that's up and coming, and that's being led by the Rocky Mountain HIDA sponsored group.
Oh, very good. Good timing on my part.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I think it's really important to intervene with students as young as we possibly can on preventing drug usage. And then lastly, because I have questions for other participants, the camp postcard, I also think that should be expanded to maybe middle-aged kids. I think middle-age, that's really a critical age to try to reach them. So however we can do that, I'd love to see it. I was at the shop with a cop recently for the Christmas gifts and or the holiday gifts, and that was really nice to see the police officers interacting with the kids. Just really good relationship building. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Then for Greg, I think it's Cassell with APS.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I really appreciate the learning about all the resources that you had for mental health. I had absolutely no idea that you had, psychologists and therapists and so forth. So glad to see that. My question for you again about the substance abuse, do you have anything in the school district to address that?
Specifically, no. What we would do is our nurses, again, one of our frontline employees, a counselor, would identify those and, provide other resources within the community.
So how would a nurse know? So the student would actually have to go to the nurse, or a teacher would?
If those signs or symptoms were there, that's what we would be looking for, is that, does the school counselor detect something, whether it's a smell or an activity or.
Well, I can just tell you, and it's not just APS, but I'm in the Cherry Creek School District, and I hear all the time from teachers about kids actually like vaping and using marijuana in the classroom, let alone at home. So I think you'd have 1 million kids showing up. But anyway, I think that's important to address. My other question for you is on skipping school, because I think that's a big, that maybe is a big sign, right? Of what if they're not in the classroom, where are they? What are they doing? And so how do you address that with parents? And maybe parents don't care that their kids are skipping school.
Sure. As a matter of fact, following the Hinckley High School incident, we had a meeting with family, and that was one of their questions. How are you keeping my student in school? It's really kind of a two-pronged approach. We're going to be doing our job, but we need parental interaction. If your student gets up and leaves school, we're not going to forcibly pull them back into the classroom. That's something that we need to work on together with, again, parental involvement.
But do you just send a notice saying, hey, your child hasn't been in school for 3 days in a row? Or do you actually bring them in for counseling? Like you have all these counseling resources.
Absolutely. They're brought in, and the automated system as well will notify students when that attendance isn't showing up from first period to seventh period.
Okay. Are parents allowed in the classrooms?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. I saw a program, I can't remember what city it was, somewhere Midwest or East Coast, where a bunch of dads, they were having a lot of trouble in the school, and a bunch of dads came together and were going into the schools to help, build relationship with the kids, make sure that they're going to their classroom, that type of thing. I thought it was kind of a neat program.
Absolutely. We do have something similar here in APS. It's called Watchdog. It's a watchdog program for dads. Generally is last period of the day into after school recess. We have two programs. Anybody can volunteer to be an APS. Can be a parent, come in and volunteer in a classroom. Parents are always welcome. And then we have community partners, groups that want to come in and provide support in the school district. And we will take anybody that wants to come in and spend some time.
Okay, wonderful. And the Safe to Tell that everybody was mentioning, it's confidential. It's not necessarily anonymous, but it's confidential.
It is anonymous.
It is anonymous.
It's under the umbrella of the Colorado Attorney General. So it's there is to the point where law enforcement would need a warrant to find out, served on the Attorney General, to find out who submitted a tip. So it is 100% anonymous. That's really the only way it works. There is a box that we can have dialogue, and the analyst will ask, do you want to be identified? Are you willing to speak to somebody at the school? So that dialogue does happen via through the app or through the phone call with the 3-digit number and some encryption. So it has to be anonymous. It's the only way it works. clearly, listening to Kira, we need to, again, continue to stress that.
Sure, thank you. And then just lastly,
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry, your time is up.
can I just say thank you to her?
Okay,
I love hearing about the mentoring programs.
Okay. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Chief Wilson, where are these young people getting these guns?
Sir, I think that obviously there's access to guns within homes that maybe are not properly secured. There's people that are selling guns out on the streets that they have maybe stolen in a burglary or such. And I think we've talked about the issues with social media, things like Snapchat, and I know Councilmember Lawson had just talked to me about this just the other day, where kids are telling her that they can just go on Snapchat and there's guns for sale, and they can, create a location to go and do that, and then it disappears from it. Also, what we're seeing across the nation, and we've had a couple instances here in the city of Aurora. It's becoming more prevalent for us, but the ghost guns, where people can order these things and manufacture their guns at home, where there's no serial numbers, there's no regulation whatsoever. So, those are just some of the ways that people these kids are getting these guns. And so, again, we need, parents to be involved, checking backpacks, checking rooms, checking under the beds, knowing what knowing what social media sites their kids are on, and being engaged in that. And again, we do have two positive stories that just came out in this last month where parents called us and did find guns, and were able to turn that over to us.
Are we ever going to prosecute parents for that they're knowing that their children have illegal firearms?
Sir, I think that's a discussion that, legislators should have, as well as the district attorneys and the judicial system should get involved in, if that's something that we in the state of Colorado want to go down.
You identified two vehicles used, I think one in the, or one or more, I can't remember. I know you identified one in the central incident, the closest central, and you identified a vehicle used in the Hinckley incident. Are those vehicles permanently seized, or what will happen to those vehicles?
So those that have been recovered, they'll be a part of, I know in the Nome Park shooting that was close to Central, that there's evidence that was in that vehicle, as well as the pickup truck where the Brave security personnel from APS that returned fire, that will also be kept as evidence.
Well, but are these vehicles, is this a seizure of these assets?
Well, it's a seizure until the case is completed, sir, and then the determination will be made. But we're not seizing it as a city or as a police department. We're not seizing it.
I'm surprised there's not a vehicle used in a crime. I get the evidence issue, but it seems like after whatever sentencing occurs, it would seem like that the vehicle would revert to the government or the taxpayers.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, sir, on how that exactly works, but I know that, at least for the long term, it's going to be part of our evidence bay and part of the prosecution.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Castle, Aurora Public Schools Director of Security. There are school districts, some school districts in the country have metal detectors to prevent a young person putting a handgun in a backpack. What safeguards do we have, and why don't we have metal detectors?
I think if you do the research, metal detectors don't work. It's very, very tough to have a sterile environment like a school that's used 15 hours a day for after school events and PTA meetings and basketball games. It's very difficult to have that sterile environment remain sterile. So, particularly with COVID, we had, multiple doors being used to get students in efficiently and keeping that social distance. So if you look at most of the research, metal detectors do not work.
You have multiple access points to the same school?
Correct.
Isn't that problematic if you say you're requiring non-students to sign in using one point of access and you have multiple points of access?
Sure. Students have one point of access. Parents and visitors have another. So there are generally two Again, during our COVID protocol, elementary schools had multiple, again, to keep that social distance in place. But strongly look at some of the research out there on metal detectors, Mayor, and you'll find that predominantly they're not effective.
Yeah, I think that New York City uses them.
People that like them are the people that sell metal detectors.
Well, tell me what you're going to do to protect our students in this situation where somebody can bring a gun in a backpack.
Absolutely, and we want to invest in tried and true methods, which are trusted adults, students reporting other students who have handguns in their possession. That is far more efficient and has been successful than attempting to put metal detectors at the front doors.
Okay. We have 20 minutes remaining. I'm going to go through each member, and if you have a question, a single question, please ask it succinctly to be respectful for other members to also be able to ask questions. Councilmember Lawson, you are recognized for one question.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to ask maybe each one of the individuals on the panel, right now I see that we need to focus, we of course need to do prevention, and we're doing a lot of prevention, but I also think right now we need to do intervention. So I just want to know from everyone, just quickly, what is one thing that we can do intervention wise so we could kind of come together and focus on that point as well? I know the prevention is important, but the intervention side is important as well. So Chief Wilson, can you give me one thought there and then just go down the panel?
Sure, ma'am. I think just, focusing on people, the Safe to Tell programs, the targeted violence prevention, and having parents get involved and to get into, their kids' phones, to get into their kids' rooms and their backpacks. And then just having like what Kiara said about having kids that feel empowered to report things and to stand up and be a role model.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And then Christina?
I would say hiring the remainder of the staff and getting our multidisciplinary team up and running, fully up and running, to start providing that wraparound support in coordination with our system-based organizations and departments of human services.
Okay, and then Greg, from the APS standpoint?
Again, I'm going to echo Chief Wilson. After she made her public statement to the media, 2 parents came forward and found guns. We need parental involvement. That's a huge component that we're missing in some cases.
Okay, and then lastly, Kiara?
I believe that having the community and parents engaged and aware is something that we need.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That was my question.
Councilmember Zavonic, you are recognized for one question.
Mr. Cazell, if metal detectors aren't the answer, how do we harden the targets, and do you have enough SROs?
Currently, with our relationship with the Aurora Police Department, I think as far as SROs goes, we're well staffed in that area. Again, target hardening does exist. Multiple door entries, secured vestibules, so it takes multiple entries to get into the building. Panic alarms are out there, our camera systems identifying visitors before they enter the building. And again, students know what's going on. Students know when a student may have a gun in his backpack and they're reporting it. So all of those are where we're investing our resources.
Thank you, Councilmember Zavonic. Councilmember Drinsky, you are now recognized for one question.
I do not have a question.
Councilmember Sundberg, you are now recognized for one question.
Hear me there?
Yes.
Quick statement and a question for Chief Wilson. The statement is that I've seen through a relative how teenagers can be reckless no matter what socioeconomic level they're on. Kids are being brash and reckless in the glorification of guns. And then Chief Wilson, if you had a wish list to do more in this problem, what would it be?
Well, being full staffed for sure, and then just increasing the gang unit and just making sure that the city is backing all these different programs, whether it's prevention, intervention, and that we really have a place for kids to go, and that we have perhaps a formal mentoring program that I know everybody wants to work on. So there's so many great ideas. I think my biggest wish was to bring all these great minds together and for the city to have a program, kind of like back in the day when we had the homeless outreach. We had many nonprofits all talking about homelessness, and then the city brought them all together, and now we have a homeless coordinator in Lena Dalton. And so I think that that's what we need to do here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Medina, you are recognized for one question.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Kiara. If you were able to design a center, what would it have in it? What would you want in it?
If I was able to design a center specifically for youth,
Yep.
it would have mentors, volunteers who actually want to help the youth, specialists, people who have like knowledge in a specific career that could help youth clarify what they want in the future that is not violence.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McConnell, you are now recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mayor. This one's for Kathy. Can we get some examples of what you mean by protective services and also a link to the supportive research and kind of like the guidelines that you're utilizing for your programming?
Sure, I can send that information. I will need to, can I provide it back to the organizer of the call?
Sure. I think you could also email all of City Council. I'll toss in the email address in the chat here.
I will certainly do that. And I think that the services that we recommend or refer youth to help increase their protective factors are very individualized. It really depends on what we find from their communities that care youth survey, and also sitting down and interviewing the youth and their family. And so we put all of that information together and sort through very many services that might be appropriate to really target that particular youth's needs. So it could be, we have a contract with the Conflict Resolution Center. If a youth is in a lot of conflict, they can learn conflict resolution skills. It might be, a sports team. It might be a lot of different things that are very individualized per each youth.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Coombs, you are now recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had put this in the chat and Greg answered it somewhat, which is about how the risk assessment addresses access to firearms. You said if weapons are in the home, that's a question, but what about other sources of access to firearms? And if you say yes, that they do have access to firearms, then what kind of follow-up steps are taken? Like, for example, ensuring or that parents have information about properly securing firearms, or if they have access to firearms elsewhere outside of the home. What's the response to that?
Sure, during the threat assessment process, access to weapons is one of the questions. And the psychologist, the counselor, would really two-part. If the parent is present during the threat assessment, most of the time we prefer that they are. We explore that. Are the weapons locked up? Are they not? What is the access to them? And then we also work with our SROs in the building to go do a site visit, go to the home, and give the parents tips, options for securing those weapons. Gun locks are, I think, provided through the Department of Justice. So those are some of the things that we follow up on when a student is in a threat assessment.
What about access to other firearms like the ghost guns or things like that?
Our question's pretty generic. Our counselors are, trying to dig in and ask those. We're looking for, again, generally handguns, rifles, those type of things when a student is under a threat assessment.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, you are now recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is for Kathy with Aurora Mental Health. Again, I appreciate all the mentoring programs that you have. My question is again about substance abuse. Do you have programs for the youth if they're referred from the school, for example?
Yeah, that is actually an area that is under development for us. We do have some outpatient services, but not enough to meet the need. We actually just found out today that we got some funding from our local managed service organization that's flowing through the Office of Behavioral Health. So we will be developing more, a more comprehensive substance use treatment services for youth.
And that would, and the schools would be notified or educated on that.
Yes, correct. We also, our school-based therapists can do screenings for substance use needs and refer kids to services, but there truly just aren't enough substance use services available for youth right now.
I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Cazell, do you think that the Safe to Tell program is robust enough? So it seems that it is related to schools, but how about reporting incidents for young people that are doing things that might be outside the school in, say, during the summer? Is that a robust enough system to capture the incidents that we're concerned about?
Absolutely. There, when you're into the platform, there's a drop down, and it does provide your school or the school that may be impacted. But Safe to Tell is monitored 24 hours a day by the Kayak Colorado Information Analysis Center, which is part of the Colorado Department of Public Safety. So there's always analysts working that 24 hours a day. Those tips, when they're submitted to the analyst, they also are submitted to every school district in the state. So they would get a tip if it's specific to them, as well as to the law enforcement partner that is responsible for that school district. So if it's in the middle of the summer and they're reporting, a friend is trying to purchase a gun, that would go out, that would go to my team, but more specifically, that would be routed to the police department. Again, after, summertime, schools aren't in session, so that would be something where Chief Wilson and her team would pick up that tip and follow it. Again, Safe to Tell is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it can be anything in the community that scares our youth.
We have 8 minutes remaining. Is there any member who wishes to ask a question?
Mayor, ask a question.
Councilmember Lawson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I understand the Safe to Tell is what you stated, but I think because it's so linked to different governmental organizations, and that's where I think a lot of youth are like, well, yeah, but they're not too sure about it. I know it's been useful, but that's why I was asking Chief Wilson about another extension of that. So I understand what it says, but I think when you say the AG's office, it goes to all the schools, it goes to that. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of linkage there where I think kids are like, I'm not sure if I feel as secure as if it was just something different. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying.
I think the Safe to Tell numbers have far exceeded expectations the last 2 years. We do have it out in every school, the posters, and I apologize. The Safe to Tell will go specifically to the school the child selects, as well as the law enforcement partner that's responsible for that school. So again, not every school, I apologize, but every school is signed into Safe to Tell. The Safe to Tell numbers have really increased. There's been a number of media stories about it. What I would fear is that you're going to duplicate something that already exists. We had a SafeNet, which was within APS, and SafeNet was within our domain, within our internet, and we were really getting usage out of that. Kids will default to Safe to Tell. Not saying it's a bad idea. I would just want to put some thought in that before we start making multiple platforms where kids can report things.
Yeah, and I was just saying, because there's some kids that aren't in school. I mean, they're not even part of the school system.
that maybe want to report things and that live in our community as well. So that's why I understand what you're saying, but I think there should be, I'm not trying to duplicate, but there's also some kids that are not in school. They're just not. So.
Okay. Is there a member that wishes to ask another question?
Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. This question will be for Chief Wilson, and it's based off of something that Kiara mentioned. I was really taken aback by when she mentioned that a child abduction was nearly successfully executed because of fear to contact APD over issues around immigration status. And I'm just wondering, how do we currently communicate that to our youth? Are we doing that at all, letting folks know that APD does not inquire about immigration status and that their cooperation with APD is paramount to keeping our community safe?
Yes, sir. Through our community engagement opportunities, we're constantly having those conversations. We've actually gone on radio stations and gone out to community groups and let them know that we are public safety. We're not interested in your immigration status, and that we want public safety is for everyone, and we want everyone to feel safe to be a witness or to call in and if they've been victimized. And knowing that sometimes that fear is puts a target on their back where people do victimize them because they think they're fearful of calling us. So, you know, we can always do better in that, but we do you know, messages out on our Spanish Facebook and that as well.
All right. Thank you. And
further questions by council?
I apologize, Mayor.
Oh. Okay.
Just a quick follow-up. Can we step up that messaging, I guess, in schools, since we're talking about youth violence specifically here?
Absolutely, we can. And I know that we've gone and presented to the Lotus School of Excellence, which is a large immigrant refugee school. And so we're making sure that we're making those connections, but I will put it on our top list, sir, to make sure we're reiterating it.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Further questions? I have a question. Chief Wilson, you said something related to the Central High School case, that it was not a gang, but it was a group of individuals. Please describe to me what's the difference. I would assume that a gang is a group of individuals that coalesce in some type of organized status.
So for for a group to be considered a gang, sir, there's certain indicators that we follow as far as labeling them as a gang, and that is, you know, whether they're wearing certain colors, you know, graffiti, those types of things, whatever names they may go by, and just that sort of organized group. And then groups, so we think in this past instance, it's just a group of kids that were beefing against one another. You know, this friend group and that friend group, and they were arguing about different things, and it escalated to gun violence, unfortunately. So, you know, and I can always bring it to public safety, sir. If you guys are interested in more information, we can bring our gang intervention unit in and have them talk about what constitutes a gang and what we have to follow before we can say it's a gang motivated or a gang crime, and, you know, by all the rules that we have to follow. And then just kind of what we're seeing as far as these groups that are popping up across the city, which is just, you know, 5 kids decide, hey, let's, you know, they could even be linked to, you know, they're wanting to get into rapping. They have beefs on social media about, you know, rapping, you know, what they want to do as far as writing songs and this, that, and the other thing. So there's just a lot of different things that these kids are turning to violence instead of dealing with their emotions in a more positive way, in a nonviolent way.
Well, I do think we need more information on this, because obviously this is a dynamic process, and the social structures are constantly evolving. And obviously, if the resulting effect is a mass shooting, then it's something we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely, sir. We can bring it to public safety if you'd like.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank the council members who participated in this special study session. I think it was very fruitful in terms of better understanding the challenges before us and better understanding a path forward. Thank you, everybody. The special study session of December 15th is adjourned.
Thank you.